Church, our word for this season is more. God says that He is able to do far more abundantly than we ask or think, Ephesians 3:20, which is an invitation to us. We as the church get to pray, we get to ask God and anticipate that God will take those prayers and do even more than we think. How sweet it would be to look back on this season in the life of the church and know that we prayed prayers in faith, but they were small prayers, and God took them and breathed Spirit-filled life onto them and did far more than we could have imagined, more for His glory, more for the unity in the body. He did more for maturity and growing us up in faith, more for mission and more for mercy. God is able to take those small prayers and do even more. You know, the beautiful thing is, as a church, we have already seen God do this. We've already seen God do more than we imagined. Columbia Presbyterian Church was planted 10 years ago. 60 of us met on a Sunday morning to worship together. And the church was founded as a Great Commission church, to be disciple-making disciples in a church-planting church. And God has done just that. We've already seen friends come to faith in Christ. They've been baptized and they've been trained up and discipled in the faith. We've seen 2 church plants launch out of our body, and we've been able to help and host a 3rd church plant. And we're seeking for a 4th where God would have us plant within the city. We've seen our membership rise up and start mercy ministries in the city, ministries that touch teen moms and touch women in the sex industry, ministries that help those with special needs, and ministries that help those who are poor, those for literacy. Members have done these ministries through our body and in the city. And we've seen God raise up laborers for our college campuses, USC and Benedict and Allen, as we've seen leaders go onto these campuses and see students come to faith. So even as we plot and plan for these things, we can say that God has already done them, and we can't wait to see God do more and more of these things to come.
Well, Colpres is a city church. We're not just from one neighborhood, but there are singles, couples, young families, older families, retired folks from around the city. We all gather in this place. And similarly, international students from all over the world are coming to gather in this place.
For me, it was that truth was clearly proclaimed, that many of the people were involved in mercy outreach in the city, and that the worship's wholehearted.
And when you hear people who the whole church kind of goes silent as they're listening very closely to something during the sermon, or you hear the rise in people's voices as they're worshiping because it really is stirring their heart, and those are 2 of the things I really enjoy.
And then when we were able to go full-time overseas in January 2019, the church was able to commission us and send us out and to support us in all the ways that they have since then.
So we want to see generations upon generations reached. 1 Timothy 2:2 talks about wanting to see the beauty of the gospel entrusted into faithful men and women that have entrusted in other faithful men and women for God's glory.
I became a believer and a Christian at Columbia Presbyterian, and I just kept taking leaps of faith, and I just saw God continue to work in my life.
And I became a Christian through the ministry of Columbia Presbyterian Church.
I found God in the gospel through the growth groups that I've been in.
I was scared to come in the beginning, but when I finally got the courage to come to this church, I saw what it actually meant to be a Christian and how you live for God.
I first started attending Colpres. I wouldn't say I was a Christian, and as the time came and I was able to be a part of families with campus outreach and just be honed in with people who know the Lord and love Him and just get to see Him work through them, it's really brought me closer to the Lord, and then I became a believer.
They've helped me to see myself as a beloved son of God.
They have shown me how to read my Bible and that it's okay to ask questions.
Growing up, I never went to church, so I had no idea what the Christian life entailed. I think it's cool, especially with my background, to see people who have never heard the gospel before get to hear it for the first time.
Our hope as we go into the new building is that Columbia Presbyterian will become the family of God right here in Columbia.
There's just such a sense of community, and it's so welcoming that that's what I hope to see.
If you grew up in a black church, like it's a very drastic change, but I think CPC is so good, and I would love to see more minorities be a part of it.
That we would not sit on the sidelines, but that we would have a heart that goes, I've got to be a part. I've got to support, I've got to pray, I've got to reach out, because I want to be involved in seeing God glorified overseas.
The Lord has been incredibly gracious to this church, and I think using this church as a hub to raise ministers of the gospel is a way that God could be glorified and honored by the resources that He's given to this church.
I pray that we would continue to be about coming before a holy God as people who need Him and receiving the love He's given us. And I pray that we would continue to invite people into that.
Church, that's our prayer. Simply praying that we would raise enough money and get in a new space and everyone would get a seat. That's a small prayer. I don't hear anybody praying that. We are asking boldly that as a church we would join hands and see God do far more abundantly than all we ask or imagine in our hearts, in our church body, and in the great city of Columbia.